Hello, my name is Dia Salebi. I am from Al-Mustansiyya University. I'm going to read Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, pages 112 to 119. I don't know, do I? You were the one saying it. Harry rubbed his forehead, thinking. He had a vague idea he had heard the name before, but he could not think where. I think Voldemort's looking for him. Poor bloke, said Ron fervently. Harry sat up, still rubbing his scar, now wide awake. He tried to remember exactly what he had seen in the dream, but all that came back was a mountainous horizon and the outline of the little village cradled in a deep valley. I think he's abroad. Who, Grigorovich? Voldemort. I think he's somewhere abroad, looking for Grigorovich. It didn't look like anyone in Britain. You reckon you were seeing into his mind again? Ron sounded worried. Do me a favor and don't tell Hermione, said Harry, although how she expects me to stop seeing stuff in my sleep. He gazed up at little Bigwiggin's cage, thinking, why was the name Grigorovich familiar? I think, he said slowly, he's got something to do with Quidditch. There's some connection, but I can't think what it is. Quidditch, said Ron. Sure you're not thinking of Gorgovich? Who? Dragomir Gorgovich, chaser. Transferred to the Chudley Cannons for a record fee 2 years ago. Record holder for most quaffle drops in a season. No, said Harry. I'm definitely not thinking of Gorgovich. I try not to either, said Ron. Well, happy birthday anyway. Wow, that's right, I forgot. I'm 17. Harry seized the wand lying beside his camp bed, pointed it at the cluttered desk where he had left his glasses, and said, Accio glasses! Although they were only around a foot away, there was something immensely satisfying about seeing them zoom toward him, at least until they poked him in the eye. Slick, snorted Ron. Reveling in the removal of his trays, Harry sent Ron's possessions flying around the room, causing Pigwidgeon to wake up and flutter excitedly around his cage. Harry also tried tying the laces of his trainers by magic. The resultant knot took several minutes to untie by hand, and purely for the pleasure of it, turned the orange ropes on Ron's Chudley Cannons posters bright blue. I would do your fly by hand, though, Ron advised Harry, sniggering when Harry immediately checked it. Here's your present, and wrap it here. It's not for my mother's eyes. A book, said Harry as he took the rectangular parcel. Bit of a departure from tradition, isn't it? This isn't your average book, said Ron. It's pure gold. 12 fail-safe ways to charm witches. Explains everything you need to know about girls. If only I'd had this last year, I would have known exactly how to get rid of Lavender, and I would have known how to get going with, well, Fred and George gave me a copy, and I've learned a lot. You would be surprised it's not all about wand work either. When they arrived in the kitchen, they found a pile of presents waiting on the table. Bill and Monsieur Delacour were finishing their breakfast while Mrs. Weasley stood chatting to them over the frying pan. Arthur told me to wish you a happy 17th, Harry, said Mrs. Weasley, beaming at him. He had to leave early for work, but he'll be back for dinner. That's our present on top. Harry sat down, took the square parcel she had indicated, and unwrapped it. Inside was a watch, very like the one Mr. and Mrs. Weasley had given Ron for his 17th. It was gold with stars circling around the face instead of hands. It's traditional to give a wizard a watch when he comes of age, said Mrs. Weasley, watching him anxiously from beside the cooker. I'm afraid that one isn't new like Ron's. It was actually my brother Fabian's, and he wasn't terribly careful with his possessions. It's a bit dented on the back, but... The rest of her speech was lost. Harry had got up and hugged her. He tried to put a lot of unsaid things into the hug, and perhaps she understood them, because she patted his cheek clumsily when he released her, then waved her wand in a slightly random way, causing half a pack of bacon to flop out of the frying pan onto the floor. "Happy birthday, Harry," said Hermione, hurrying into the kitchen and adding her own present to the top of the pile. "It's not much, but I hope you like it." "What did you get him?" she added to Ron, who seemed not to hear her. "Come on then, open Hermione's," said Ron. She had bought him a new sneakoscope. The other packages contained an enchanted razor from Brilliant Flair. "Ah, yes, this will give you the smoothest shave you will ever have," Monsieur Delacour assured him. "But you must tell it clearly what you want, as otherwise you might find you have a little less air than you would like." Chocolates from the Delacours and an enormous box of the latest Weasley's Wizard Weezes merchandise from Fred and George. Harry, Ron, and Hermione did not linger at the table, as the arrival of Madame Delacour, Fleur, and Gabrielle made the kitchen uncomfortably crowded. "I'll pack these for you," Hermione said brightly, taking Harry's presents out of his arms as the three of them headed back upstairs. "I'm nearly done. I'm just waiting for the rest of your underpants to come out of the wash, Ron." Ron's splutter was interrupted by the opening of a door on the first floor landing. "Harry, will you come in here a moment?" It was Ginny. Ron came to an abrupt halt, but Hermione took him by the elbow and tucked him on up the stairs. Feeling nervous, Harry followed Ginny into her room. He had never been inside it before. It was small but bright. There was a large poster of the wizarding band, the Weir Sisters, on one wall, and a picture of Greenock Jones, captain of the All-Witch Quidditch team, the Holyhead Harpies, on the other. A desk stood facing the open window, which looked out over the orchard where he and Ginny had once played two-a-side Quidditch with Ron and Hermione, and which now housed a large, purely white marquee. The golden flag on top was level with Ginny's window. Ginny looked up into Harry's face, took a deep breath, and said, "Happy 17th. "Yeah, thanks." She was looking at him steadily. He, however, found it difficult to look back at her. It was like gazing into a brilliant light. "Nice view," he said feebly, pointing toward the window. She ignored this. He could not blame her. "I couldn't think what to get you," she said. "You didn't have to get me anything." She disregarded this too. "I didn't know what would be useful, nothing too big, because you wouldn't be able to take it with you." He chanced a glance at her. She was not tearful. That was one of the many wonderful things about Ginny. She was rarely weepy. He has sometimes thought that having 6 brothers must have toughened her up. She took a step closer to him. "So then I thought I'd like you to have something to remember me by, you know, if you meet some villa when you're off doing whatever you're doing." "I think dating opportunities are going to be pretty thin on the ground, to be honest." "There's the silver lining I've been looking for," she whispered, and then she was kissing him, as she had never kissed him before, and Harry was kissing her back, and it was blissful oblivion, better than fire whiskey. She was the only real thing in the world, Ginny, the feel of her, one hand at her back and one in her long, sweet-smelling hair. The door banged open behind them, and they jumped apart. "Oh," said Ron, pointedly. "Sorry." "Ron!" Hermione was just behind him, slightly out of breath. There was a strange silence. Then Ginny said in a flat little voice, "Well, happy birthday anyway, Harry." Ron's ears were scarlet. Hermione looked nervous. Harry wanted to slam the door in their faces, but it felt as though a cold draft had entered the room when the door opened and his shining moment had popped like a soap bubble. All the reasons for ending his relationship with Ginny, for staying well away from her, seemed to have slunk inside the room with Ron, and all happy forgetfulness was gone. He looked at Ginny. wanting to say something, though he hardly knew what, but she had turned her back on him. He thought that she might have succumbed for once to tears. He could not do anything to comfort her in front of Ron. "I'll see you later," he said, and followed the other two out of the bedroom. Ron marched downstairs through the still crowded kitchen and into the yard, and Harry kept pace with him all the way, Hermione trotting along behind them, looking scared. Once he reached the seclusion of the freshly mown lawn, Ron rounded on Harry. "You ditched her! What are you doing now? Messing her around?" "I'm not messing her around," said Harry, as Hermione caught up with them. "Ron!" But Ron held up a hand to silence her. "She was really caught up with you when you ended it." "So was I. You know why I stopped it. And it wasn't because I wanted to." "Yeah, but you ghost nogger her now, and she's just going to get her hopes up again." "She's not an idiot. She knows it can't happen. She's not expecting us to end up married or..." As he said it, a vivid picture formed in Harry's mind of Ginny in a white dress, marrying a tall, faceless, and unpleasant stranger. In one spiraling moment, it seemed to hit him. Her future was free and unencumbered, whereas his, he could see nothing but Voldemort ahead. "If you keep groping her every chance you get, it won't happen again," said Harry harshly. The day was cloudless, but he felt as though the sun had gone in. "Okay?" Ron looked half resentful, half sheepish. He rocked backward and forward on his feet for a moment, then said, "Right then, well, that's yeah." Ginny did not seek another one-to-one meeting with Harry for the rest of the day, nor by any look or gesture did she show that they had shared more than polite conversation in her room. Nevertheless, Charlie's arrival came as a relief to Harry. It provided a distraction, watching Mrs. Weasley force Charlie into a chair, raise her wand threateningly, and announce that he was about to get a proper haircut. As Harry's birthday dinner would have stretched the Burrows kitchen to breaking point even before the arrival of Charlie, Lupin, Tonks, and Hagrid, several tables were placed end to end in the garden. Fred and George bewitched a number of purple lanterns, all emblazoned with a large number 17, to hang in mid-air over the guest. Thanks to Mrs. Weasley's ministrations, George's wound was neat and clean, but Harry was not yet used to the dark hole in the side of his head, despite the twins' many jokes about it. Hermione made purple and gold streamers erupt from the end of her wand and drape themselves artistically over the trees and bushes. "Nice," said Ron, as with one final flourish of her wand, Hermione turned the leaves on the crabapple tree to gold. "You've really got an eye for that sort of thing." "Thank you, Ron," said Hermione, looking both pleased and a little confused. Harry turned away, smiling to himself. He had a funny notion that he would find a chapter on compliments when he found time to peruse his copy of 12 fail-safe ways to charm witches. He caught Ginny's eye and grinned at her before remembering his promise to Ron and hurriedly striking up a conversation with Monsieur Delacour. Out of the way," sang Mrs. Weasley, coming through the gate with what appeared to be a giant beach ball-sized snitch floating in front of her. Seconds later, Harry realized that it was his birthday cake, which Mrs. Weasley was suspending with her wand, rather than risk carrying it over the uneven ground. When the cake had finally landed in the middle of the table, Harry said, "That looks amazing, Mrs. Weasley." "Oh, it's nothing, dear," she said fondly. Over her shoulder, Ron gave Harry the thumbs up and mouthed, "Good one." By 7 o'clock, all the guests had arrived, led into the house by Fred and George, who had waited for them at the end of the lane. Hagrid had honored the occasion by wearing his best and horrible hairy brown suit. Although Lupin smiled as he shook Harry's hand, Harry thought he looked rather unhappy. It was all very odd. Tonks beside him looked simply radiant. "Happy birthday, Harry," she said, hugging him tightly. 17, eh? Said Hagrid, as he accepted a bucket-sized glass of wine from Fred. 6 years to the day since we met, Harry. Do you remember it?
Fantastic.